Hello, my friends. Again, this is Adli Abouzeedan, uh, welcoming you in a new lecture uh, of the series of lectures which I do post under the Universal Inspirations Facebook page, which is in English. We have run up to now two lectures. One was about uh, one was about the first one was an introduction, general introduction about why I started this project and what is the purpose of it. The second lecture, last one, was about success and how we define success. And as I told you before, this lecture was a response to many people's desire for me to kind of talk about a little bit more about strategies related to success. And this came from different people. Some of my friends who I knew very well through years, they wanted me to just give them advice about strategy of success, and I thought I'd like to address this whole thing in a more generalized way, so everybody benefit from it. And there was some people who were talking about. They told me that the voice was not that good in the last lecture, so I thought maybe the best thing is to use the microphone, and I'm trying to use the microphone now. I hope that the voice will be better. And last lecture we focused a lot about the definition of success. What is success? And we said that there are certain criteria by which we can gauge our success. We talked about, first of all, that the thing we do should be connected to humanism and good virtues, good values. And any success which doesn't have that character is not characterized as success. I mean, there are in history a lot of evil schemes which did damage, horrible damage, but they can never be considered a success. The other factor which you talked about is the continuation, that succeeding on temporary basis, or succeeding once and then failing the rest of your life, is not really true success. True success is the continuation. We talked about that it has to be based on real accomplishments and not false ones. And the last thing, that it has to be hooked to general philosophy of life that people should really connect to. In this lecture I will talk about the second stage of this process, which is the process itself. Once you have defined things in a good way according to those four criteria, then we proceed to the second stage. And in this second stage, I'll be talking about goals, nature of goals that you set to yourself, the strategies, how you reach these goals, and then how you implement, or you plan to reach these goals, and then how you implement this plan. First of all, I'll talk about the goals. And there are a lot of things said about goals and how you reach them, not as the strategies, but this first part, this lecture will be divided into three parts. The first part, I'll talk the goals themselves, and I will raise some issues related to that, and then we'll talk about planning or strategies, and then we talk about implementation in the third section, or third part. So let's start with the first part, the goals. Uh, everybody free to choose whatever kind of goals he wants in his life. But there are certain things which do define goals which are worth working for. I mean, you can choose whatever goals you want in life, but for somebody who's neutral, somebody who's just kind of trying to helping you, there are certain engaging things. There are certain things which motivate me to feel that this person is really have chose the right set of goals. So, what are these things? What you should consider when you put your goals in life or you set your goals in life? And I thought about that for some time for this lecture. And I feel that there are three things which are very, very central in choosing your goals. And I think they should really guide you when you go into that, when you go into the choice of your goals in life. First, one of these is it has to be ambitious goals. It has to be ambitious goals. I mean, if you're interested in education, for example, and you want to be a well-educated person and contribute to science and knowledge in life, you cannot set your goals to be beyond certain level. For example, I mean, if you don't really try to hit the highest possible criteria of success in knowledge, which is getting into professorship level, then you really cannot impact too much your knowledge sphere. If you, for example, give you an example. If you want to be a person who really impact management thinking in life, and you want to do that based on research and scientific approach, you cannot just put your goal to finish, for example, a bachelor degree in management, because that will train you to a certain level, but that will not give you the possibilities to really impact the field, because you really have to be trained at a higher level. You really have to be getting into professorship to be able to make these contributions. Okay, so you really need to get in your planning, when you design your goals, you have to try to get the highest possible level that you can in order really to impact the world. And maybe you cannot, maybe in practice, in practicality, maybe you will never reach that goal, but in that journey, definitely your contribution in the field would be far better if you, from the beginning, choose the lower level of goals. Because if we, I mean, not everybody can reach his goals up to 100%. It's always there are always setbacks. So maybe you are able to reach 80% of your goals, 70% of your goals within a certain area. But when if you choose to, if your ambitions were really very high, for example, I want to impact management thinking in the world. The highest level of scientific recognition is the Nobel Prize now. That's one of the things that is characteristic for people who really do a lot in their area. And maybe your goal, you set a goal for yourself to get Nobel Prize in management. I don't know. I don't think there is a management Nobel Prize sitting, but there must be some areas where there are rewards equal to that anyway. But you choose the highest level, you know. Okay, let's take medicine, and then maybe it's easier. Okay, medicine. You put in your mind to try to get Nobel Prize in medicine. That is the highest recognition of your science contribution within medicine. But maybe the reality, maybe you cannot get into that, but at least you will be reaching levels of knowledge in medicine, which is highly recognized and accepted. Not all the professors, for example, in medicine get that price, but at least the ones who try, they reach a lot of recognition in their field. Another example to clarify that. If you a person of a businessman, if you're a businessman and you want to achieve your goals in life, if your goals became that I want to be a millionaire, getting accumulated wealth up to $1 million, maybe you'll be able to reach, maybe after a couple of years, 50% of that, which is about $500,000. But if your goal, if you raise the ceiling of your goal to say, no, I want to be a billionaire, I want to get my first $1 billion within 15 years. If you achieved 50% of that goal, what you achieved is $500 million. Okay, that's 1,000 times what we have achieved in the first scheme. So always, my recommendation is that when you always want to get into education, get into achieving your goals, you always try to get the best, or put your projections as high as possible, as high as possible. And the lower the ceiling of your goals in life in general, the less you can accomplish. And I talk about myself as an example. I mean, I always, when I was young, I was very interested in science, very interested in knowledge. I get used to read books all the time. Get used to one of, for example, of the most things which interested me in television were the documentaries. I remember a series called Nova, and still now, it's up to now, it's running. It's amazing documentary, and I remember that I could used to sit down like in hours and watch these things. And I was a young kid in Kuwait. I mean, I never really, but I was dreaming all the time. I wanted to be the greatest scientist in my life. I really wanted that, and I worked very hard 2 years to get there. But things were not easy. There was a lot of circumstances that is kind of stopped me from getting into that level. But at least I achieved a lot of things in that direction, because I finished my PhD. I did some good contribution in my area. Definitely, I did not reach the full potential of my desires, but at least I achieved some reasonable level of getting involved in science and knowledge, and now I am trying to keep that momentum. But from the beginning, my ambitions were very limited. If I was satisfied with just getting my Bachelor of Science in Kuwait University and stayed in Kuwait, I would have never been able to contribute anything to science. Now, definitely, I still did not reach that level. I still feel that I need to do more, but at least I have achieved something. And this is the same thing in all other areas. And I get, you know, and people know that, they know that their ambitions are gauged by their goals. Their ambitions are gauged by their goals. The lower level, the lower the ceiling of their goals, the less ambitious they are. And in history, most of the personalities we remember in life were really very, very ambitious. Their ceilings were very high. I mean, take for example Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. She was a very seductive lady, and in Egypt, everybody liked her. She was a glorious, very, very beautiful woman, and very intelligent woman. And she knew how to use her beauty to achieve her goals in life. And Cleopatra, at a certain point, decided to make one of the she decided to kind of hook herself to the top leadership of the Roman Empire. I really don't remember the name of this guy up to now. He is well known in history. And he was sent to Egypt really to capture her. He ended up being a captive to her because she had the trust in herself that she can really get him to love her. That self-confidence and level of understanding their potential was very important in her ability to seduce or to make this Roman person her own lover, and through her control of his emotions, she saved her country, Egypt, from the Roman slaughter, and at the same time she got Egypt to be a more powerful country. And there's great, there's a lot of examples in life, and usually the ambitious people, the people who have the self-confident, they don't accept small goals. And a very great example is some people I know, in person. One of them is a great personality, a great lady, great young woman. She told me all the time that she was going to take over the world. She's not after small things. She really wants to be a great personality in the world, and now she is. Her picture is on the newspaper. She works with the women entrepreneurship, and she became a big star, and I'm very glad for her. But I always, when I was talking with her all the time, I felt that she really always put very high goals for herself, and that was one of the key, maybe the major key element that made her success. Sure. But I meet other people. I meet other girls who are in her same age, and when you talk with them, you feel that their ambitions are far less. And I know actually some of her friends who started the journey in life within the same period, and their ambitions were more of very limited. It's centered around just finding some work and probably finding the right man to love, and these are legitimate goals, but they're not of that level. I'm saying. So the first criteria for when you choose your goals in life, that the ceiling has to be as high as possible, and your ambition has to be as high as possible. Because if you achieved part of these ambitions, you will be doing very well. But when you restrict your goals, when you go down with your level of your goals, what you achieved in life will be always far less than what we anticipated. And the same thing with military leaders. Napoleon Bonaparte. You know, everybody knows the history. He came from a humble family. He was not even from the royal families in the Parisian society. He's from Corsica, an island out in the ocean. But since he was young and he got into the military academy, he always put it for himself to be the greatest military leader in the world. That was his dream. That was his goal. And he achieved it. Other officers in his school or his class, they had the same training. But why they never became great leaders? Because their ambitions from the beginning was assisted. That's what made Napoleon Napoleon. Not his only military capacity, but his ambitions and the drive he has and the goals he set for himself. That's one thing. The second thing is about related to the goals. They have to be dividable or divisible. What I mean is that when you put your goals, you need to be able to put them in stages. Any goals which are not dividable, that you cannot put in stages, are not only difficult to do, but they are not really correct goals. Example for that. I want to start a business from zero. Tomorrow I want to make $1 billion. You know, this kind of planning, this kind of goals are unrealistic. If you cannot divide that, the goal itself, okay, I want to make $1 billion business. But at the same time, the way I do that ceiling goal, or the huge goal, this goal has to be dividable, which I mean that in my business I have to be able, the nature of my business, which will be producing this $1 billion wealth to me, has to be dividable. I can't, but what I mean is that I can plan my business so I can grow with the stages. First, maybe I make my first $100 million, then I make my first $1 million, then I'll make my first $100 million, like that. And you have to have that in your mind. When another great example of that, this dividability, is the American space program and the landing on the moon. When during the Cold War, after the Second World War, there was great competition between the Soviet Union and the United States on achieving dominance in the space, on the space arena. And John F. Kennedy set the goal for NASA, which is the organization that United States built to achieve that task. He gave NASA a very huge task. So he fulfilled the first objective, landing a man on the moon. Huge task, incredible. I mean, it took a real courage from John F. Kennedy to commit United States for that. So it was the highest ceiling ever possible in space technology at that time. But one good thing about that project, that objective, which turned to be very important, is that this objective is dividable. That you can divide the process into stages, and that's what happened in reality when people start planning their strategies, because they went into that great objective through stages. First, the NASA developed technologies to get humans into space and to rotate to be able to rotate around the Earth and survive that. And that was the program which tested these technologies is the first one, which was Mercurial. I think it was Mercury. Yeah. The first one of them. There were three programs, three stages. The first stage was Mercury program. Mercury program designed to test the possibilities of launching man into the orbit around the Earth and the survivability of the people in their capsules, and how you land on the go land back again on the Earth. What happened is that these capsules really flashed into the ocean, and all the problems, all the engineering problems related to protecting the capsule in its entry into the Earth, all these things were dealt with, and Mercury was a one-man capsule. It was able only to take one man to around the Earth. Once this set of problems were solved, then NASA moved to the second stage, which is mastering the docking mechanisms, because when you want in the planning, when they planned for getting into the moon, they needed to kind of attach and detach different units in the space, and they wanted to be sure that the docking possibilities are there, and that the mechanisms for docking the different space units can be achieved. And they started the Gemini program. The Gemini program, Gemini capsule, had place for 2 people, so I was like increasing the number of people, and it tested very basic concepts of like docking in the space and how different space units can connect to each other. It increased the survivability of human in space. So it dealt with the second level of problems related to sending man to the moon. Once that is mastered, once all these technologies have been mastered, then NASA moved to this third program, which is Apollo program. Apollo program, first man, the people increased the level of the number of people to three astronauts. But not only that, NASA started to move away from the Earth and testing. First, they tested, increased the duration of the capsule around the Earth. They tested the new rockets, because Apollo was heavier capsule than the others, so they tested the new rocket which will launch man into moon, Saturn V. And then in the final stage of this stage, the Apollo program, Apollo 10 went into orbit around the moon to test the possibility of rotating around the moon, but there was no landing. Apollo 11 was the actual landing program, or the landing operation. In the United States, in 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human being to put his foot on the moon. But had NASA did not work with this stage approach to the final goal, it would have never succeeded. And if the goal itself was not dividable that way, okay, then it would not have succeeded. And this is, I take this as a clear example of this dividability. But it is the same thing even for even personal goals. I mean, if I want to be the greatest scientist in the world, I have to go through stages, and each stage have to kind of help the coming stage. First you go and you finish good high school education, then you go and finish very good bachelor degree education, and then you go and you do master degree education, and then you go and become a doctor in your field, and then you do postdoc studies, and then you go and you come closer to professorship. And when you are a professor, you have a team of students helping you, so you can focus more on the big questions. Uh, that even happened to my friend. I talk a lot about her because she really asked me to talk about this. So I'm trying to, as I said, I want everybody to benefit from that. My friend I'm talking about to you, this girl who became a very global star, when she did, the goal was very high. She wanted to be global star in the world, and she achieved that. But the goal itself was very dividable in the sense that she worked the stages. First, she worked within the context of Sweden, and after she gained she gained confidence. She gained contacts. Then she moved to the other stage. Probably at the beginning, it was more within Europe, and then she had the chance to go to the United States. And in these meetings, she met great people who helped her to be exposed within the Hollywood environment. So it was a stage-wise approach. That's why she succeeded. If she wanted to move from being unknown girl to be the girl who is she today, and become a global star, that would not have happened. And not most, all the Swedish actresses and actors, I mean, we have Swedish actresses who are now in Hollywood, but they started their career by being good actresses in the Swedish environment, and then they moved. The ones who try to make that journey once, they usually fail. And I remember a story from the time I came to Sweden. I met a Swedish girl when I said that in another lectures. I met a Swedish girl who came back from the United States. That girl went from Sweden to United States in the hope of doing something in Hollywood. But because her approach was, because she did not do anything in Sweden, she was never established actress in Sweden. She went there and she thought that things will be okay. But what she discovered is that because she did not have that packing, she was offered to get into the pornographic industry, because and that's the worst thing, that a lot of these young girls who just go there without really preparing the stage very well, they often become victims of this industry, because they seek all the time beautiful girls for their films, and the best thing is the fallouts from Hollywood. But that girl succeeded in one thing, which is really, and I feel, I know it's a great success. She realized that she cannot do anything, and that the way she approached her goal was completely different. She should have tried to do something here in Sweden, and then she moved. So courageously, she drew herself and saved herself, and I praised her decision. Said, you made the right decision, because you cannot succeed this. So first, your goals have to be very high, the highest possible. They have to be dividable, that you can work stage-wise. The third thing which is important is that your goals has to be coupled to your general strategy in life. You see, you cannot deal with life as a person who is divided into different personalities. You have to have a complete philosophy of life. You have to have a complete imagination of what you want to life. Your personality has to be intact. You cannot be deal with life in certain way in certain areas, and deal life in other way in other areas. And for example, you cannot be an honest husband and family man, and then a big liar in business, or the reverse. You're very good in business and very honest person in business, and you're terrible in your relationship with your family. You have to have a complete philosophy of life, which is of humanistic nature. And I'll tell you one thing. One of the reasons, I hope this girl listened to me now, because she always asked me about these things, and there was no time for me to explain all it, because she was in the process of succeeding. Now she succeeded. So I want her to reflect back on these things, and probably she will benefit from this video. One of the things which I feel personally that was behind the success story of this friend of mine is that I never felt that she is not holistic in her approach. She had a philosophy in life, very humanistic philosophy in life, and she was unique in that. I mean, I remember when we were talking about, for example, why she wants to do certain things. Why she wants to have money, for example. She said, Adli, I want money not because I am. She comes from rich family. She doesn't need money, but because money is a way for me to support and help other people. So she has this humanistic, total way of looking at things, and that helped her later on in two things. It helped her to stand against cheap offers, because she got cheap offers, offers which are not dignified, and I don't mean bad offers, but I mean, she was put in business context, where she was sided person instead of being the central stage person, and she refused that, because she all the time she appreciated and valued herself, and that self-appreciation and coupling to holistic approach to life and philosophy in life made her able to master her destiny and drive in the process into her goals. One of the worst things that happen to a human being is when, in your despair to achieve goals, that you become desperate and you become disoriented and you lose your connection to different parts of your life. You have all the time to have this holistic approach in life, and you have to have a philosophy behind it. And I can say it, the people I met in my life who succeeded are always people who have some ideology in their life. It can be religious ideology, they can be committed Muslims, committed Christians, committed Jews, but it can be also atheistic, Buddhistic, Hinduistic, and it can be also special philosophy. Some people have their own philosophy in life, but they deal with life through a set of goals that are very clear about when they deal with people. So people respect them and they give them what they're worth. I mean, this girl I'm talking about, I'm very sure that that she has been subjected to times when people were trying just to push her aside, but she always knew what she wanted, because she had this holistic approach. That is very important. Without relating your goals to a general philosophy in life, you will never succeed. And I'm very sure, for example, that John F. Kennedy, when he took that big decision of sending him on the moon, he was reflecting not only, people talk about the competition between the West and East, but it's not that. I mean, I'm very sure if it was another president in the United States who was at his period, probably he would never said that. But what made John F. Kennedy take that decision is he, as a person, always believed in the greatness of the United States. He was a true believer in the ability of the American people to deliver. And that self-confidence in the American people and his philosophy about the greatness of the United States make him able to take the decision. So, great goals in life does not come from people who don't believe, who don't have this belief system in what they do. You cannot be great just by setting great goals. You have to believe in your greatness and the greatness of the people you are working with. And it's like any organization. If the leadership of the organization doesn't really feel in depth the greatness of their organization and the ability of the people in their organization to deliver, they can never set high goals. So three things. The ceiling of your goals in life have to be very high, the highest possible, and you should never be shy on that. Never. and let the people say whatever. They say that you are crazy, no problem. As long as what you say is based on truth. It's not hallucinations. But don't let the difficulties and the energy demanded to reach your goals suppress your level of, or the ceiling of your goals. Hit the highest ceiling you can, and don't be afraid of that, and you will achieve. The second, it has to be can be divided stage wise, because you can then achieve individual goals that lead you to the final goal, and then it has to be coupled to general philosophy in life. Okay, that's about the goals. Let's talk a little bit about the strategies. You have defined your goals, and now let's talk about the strategies. And I don't want to go too much in details and strategies because it's it's classical management thinking. I'll point to them quickly, and I see if I continue the second part of this lecture only by strategies and do separate lecture for the implementation. Maybe I'll do that. But let's talk now about strategies. The first thing about strategies, which is very important, strategies is the way you do things. Okay, so we talk about how you do things. First of all, the way you do things or your strategies has to be well thought of, which means that you don't act haphazardly. You are not driven by emotions, and you are not delusioned about the objectives and the reality around you. So it has to be well planned. And I give you an example. One of the right example that we can use just to reflect on these things is the way the schemes that put by the Nazi party in Germany, how they at the end failed. Because you will find these mistakes very clarified. I mean, the Nazi teaching themselves are very crude and they were evil. But now I'm not judging the Hitler or the Nazi experience out of their evilness or value, because there is no disagreement between humanity that this is the most evil scheme ever tried. But I'm talking now about strategies here. The first period of the Nazi party in Germany witnessed achievements. I mean, before the Nazis took Germany, the Nazi party took Germany, power in Germany, there was a lot of economic problems in Germany. The country was in a true despair. People were out of work. The Germans were suffering. They had huge burdens or huge stresses because of the results of the First World War. So the first period of the Nazi party governance of Germany saw a lot of achievements. The problem started when the Nazis lost their control on their thinking, and they started making mistakes one after one after one after one. And when the Germans, or the planners of the Nazi Germany started to lose control on their objectives, and they start really lose this sight on what they're doing, things became very distorted. And I'll give you one example for one of the worst bad planets. When Germany decided to invade Russia, their whole perspective, their whole understanding, okay, the objective was to defeat Russia. That was the Nazi objective. And it's an evil objective, but it's their objective. But how they went into doing it? There were no true understanding of the conditions in the Russian society. There was not even, and it's amazing, there was no coupling to the history of Russia. I mean, many people before Hitler tried to subdue the Russian people. And there is a great heritage of historical events through history. None of the Nazi leaders even had the least chance for what is Russia really? What is that objective that you're trying to achieve? There was no well thinking of how you achieve that goal. There was no in-depth studies. There was no true understanding of things. The Nazi party leaders were blinded by the successes, early successes in France and other areas, and they became very blind for the huge differences between the Russian fronts and what happened in France and what happened in the other countries. So it was totally absurd and not well understood and studied plan. Even I'm not talking about planning on the paper. You can have great plan on the paper, but how much of that is really well thought of? Another example from history: when Scott decided to be the first man who reached the South Pole, there was another guy from Norwegian, Admundson, one of the greatest polar scientists, polar discoverers, Norwegian, who conquered already the North Pole, and he was going to conquer the South Pole. Scott did not succeed. He perished in the attempt. And when he reached the South Pole, already this Norwegian discoverer has already planted the Norwegian flag. Why Scott failed in his objective while this Norwegian discoverer succeeded? Scott planning was not well thought of. He neglected a lot of facts, and he was a little bit he underestimated the difficulties. Admundson, on the other side, the Norwegian guy, had very clear idea of what he was doing. So his strategies, his plan was well thought of, and it was based on experience. Admundson got used to. He went to the polar regions and lived with the Eskimo people, with the local people, to learn survival techniques, because those people who are living in the in the polar areas are the most knowledgeable people in the art of survival in these in that climate, and their existence is a witness for that. So Admundson knew that of this Norwegian guy. He knew that he can learn a lot of them. Scott did not have that attitude. He thought that he can fix everything. And I don't want to go into details, but if you read that, you find a huge difference between what this Norwegian guy was doing, which was based on true knowledge, and what Scott was doing, which is more of the emotional, a little bit fantasy. And it is tragic, because at the end Scott lost his life. He and a couple of people, and the Norwegian guy went back as a victim. The second thing, when it comes to strategies, So what you do has to be implemented in reality. It has to be well coupled to reality. Well coupled to reality. And again, I'll go back to the Nazi Germany because this is very clear. The German leaders, the German military leaders, uh, in their campaign in Russia, a lot of the things that they thought about the Russians were wrong. They were not embedded in reality. For example, they underestimated the Russians' love for their country and the resolve they have to defend their sons. At the later stages of the campaign in Russia, some of the top leaders in the German high command, they begin to understand the catastrophe of the situation and how they misunderstood everything, and they tried to convey that message to the top leadership. But that was impossible because of the way Hitler and the top leadership in the Nazi top leadership acted. It was a pure dictatorship. So they did not even allow for these ideas of critical thinking to come up to the top level. And some of the German leaders were really some of the good German leaders, professional military leaders. They paid a high price for not fulfilling what Hitler does. And one of them is Rommel, the fox of the desert, one of the most brilliant generals of the German army. He was given the choice between killing himself or being executed in a court, and he chose to take the poison. But that refusal from the top leadership and Hitler in person to see reality was catastrophic. Hitler was getting information on daily basis of the large number of the German troops which have been killed in Russia, and he never really accepted it. He always lived on a false hope that these numbers are not true. And that is the worst thing. When you start cheat yourself, then you can never succeed in achieving your goals. Okay? The same thing can be taken into this Scott attempt to reach into the South Pole. And I read a couple of books about it. Amazing. I mean, Scott did try to do planning. I'm not saying that, but his planning was not based on reality. It was he thought that he can imply and apply his own ideas without really understanding what's going on. While the Norwegian discoverer did not come to that problem solving but through pre-knowledge. He really wanted to learn, and that's why he went to the polar regions. And that knowledge that he gained during his time in the polar regions, this is what had saved him. Example, for example, the Admin the Norwegian guy, he used dogs to carry or to draw the slits, the slides. The dogs had two advantages. First of all, because they are trained in this polar environment, they don't get tired quickly. They can work for hours and hours without problem. They are adapted to that. Even in the harsh winter, they can clear that. The second thing, and that was important because then Admin can calculate how many kilometers he can do every day. The other thing is that he did not need to take food for him to feed these dogs, because he could. The weaker dogs who got sick and died, he just used their meat to feed the other dogs. On the other hand, we have Scott bringing in moose, horses, or moose. First of all, these creatures are very slow, and they are not that much used to the very harsh environment in the polar region. The second thing is that they cannot eat meat, so he has to carry with him his their food, and that's why after a while he was forced to abandon them, and he tried to continue with his men with him. While Edmiston, all the way till he reached the South Pole and came back, he all the time have a relatively easier journey. So this, the true connection to reality is very very important, and self-awareness of your capacities and your weaknesses. I mean, you have really to be very able to diagnose yourself. Where are the strengths I have? Where are the weaknesses I have? And how the weaknesses I have I can compensate for. The third issue, which is related to strategies when it comes to achieving our goals in life, is the time factor. And what I mean with that is the following. When you define your goals, then you also define the time factor. Some goals in life take from us years and years and years to achieve. Other goals can take shorter periods for certain time. For example, if I want to take a course, short course, three months course, or a 6-month course to be a coach. The course takes 6 months. It's short. But if I wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor, I need 7-8 years after I finish my high school. So goals are related to certain time frames, and you can never press the time requirements of the goals. And when you press the time requirements of the goals, then you destroy the process itself. You really kill, you kill your plan. And the true success in life is to be able to be patient. Drive and energy required, but drive and energy that without having patience it can lead to catastrophe. And I can tell you a lot of the catastrophes that happen in life is because sometimes we try to press the time factor. One of the very clear examples of that is the Challenger catastrophe. Challenger catastrophe occurred because of that, because the time factor was pressing people and nobody took responsibility to say no, stop. The crew that went to the shuttle, Challenger, in the crew there was a lady, great person, teacher, and she was the first civilian teacher, a person to go into space. And NASA and the media became very interested in that issue. There was great anticipation and great euphoria around the concept that we have for the first time just simple civilian who will be going up to space. The thing which is also was exciting that she was a teacher, and that will give a role model for the students in the United States and the schools to really feel committed to science. So the thing became a media issue. It became a prestige issue, and everybody lost the the technical side of it, that technologies does not allow all the time us to do what we want. There are limits of the technology, and we have to be aware of that and look at time perspectives. And sadly to say that there were a couple of, just for that particular launching, because one thing, the systems in the shuttle are under great strain all the time. So you really have to be aware of the environment, the weather. You cannot launch at any weather, and you cannot launch at any temperatures, because these components of the space shuttle, they're already under a lot of strain and stress because of the fuel used in launching these rockets. Often it is a hydrogen and oxygen gases that are pressurized under huge pressure. Any small mistake can cause a disaster. So things have to be done rightly. And the shuttle, for you who are interested in these things, the shuttle has two components. You have the shuttle itself, the spacecraft itself, but the system that launch it are of two components. There are the engines within the space shuttle itself that suck in liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen from the big tank, okay? And to assist the system, there are two solid rockets that resided on the right and left of the shuttle, and they were really connected to the big tank, the big huge tank, and the shuttle was just kind of hooked to the tank itself. One of the scientists who were delivering these rockets was worried, because the solid rockets have rings made of special material between its segments, because it's segmented into a number of segments. The material of that ring can sustain certain temperatures, but when the temperature go down, they can malfunction. So this scientist, at that time when NASA decided to launch, that guy was aware of this problem, and he felt worried about it, and he communicated that to NASA. So the NASA had a decision, either to wait or to launch. Again talk about the time factor. NASA should have waited, because this is one of the constraints that is stopping the process of launching the space shuttle. But because of the pressure from media, from the politicians, at a moment of weakness, the administration of NASA decided to gamble. It was unjustified gambling, because that is exactly what happened. When the rocket, when the system was launched, these ceilings, one of the ceilings could not hold itself tight, so the fuel, the solid fuel, which was burning, got out of it and started burning within the surface of the big tank, and in that tank there's of hydrogen and oxygen, so it exploded, and all the people on the surface on that shuttle perished, because the whole shuttle exploded. This is a good example of how the time factor sometimes, I'm not considering that you need all the time to be relaxed when it comes to achieving your goals, and that you should never be pressed by urgency. You should work according to plan, and you should be able to stop, and you should be able to give things more time than the original plan, if time is needed. And it's in everything we do, all our tasks. You cannot press the time factor. Surely you need to learn how to work under stress, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that something that takes 5 years to be done, you want to press it to be done in 3 years. And when you do that, you go down with your quality. There have to be balance between the quality and the time frame. If you can achieve your goals within shorter time, it's okay, no problem. But never make the price paid by the quality. And this is my advice to everybody, including my friend, this girl. She's achieving great success, but she need to be aware of the danger of trying to press time. My advice to her is take your time. You're doing very well. You're achieving great. Don't make the success blind you. Keep working with focus, clear strategies, and you'll achieve more and more and more even. The last thing, probably I'll take that in 5 minutes, is that your goal has to be coupled to your general philosophy of life. No, excuse me, that was in the goals, the nature of goals. Yeah. When it comes to strategies, we talk about that it has to be well thought of. It should be embedded in reality. We should consider the time factor. The fourth thing is resources and planning of resources. One of the things which is very critical in your ability to achieve your goals is the way you plan your resources. For every goal in life, there are required amount of resources. This can be material resources, it can be even psychological resources, it can be emotional resources, different kind of resources. You really have to have control on your understanding of these resources. You have to plan for that. You cannot just work with your resources haphazardly. You really have to have a balance. You need to have, for example, if you have a business that you want to run and you have a capital, you cannot just take your capital and consume all of it in the first 5 months before your company have put some stability in it, in the hope that once you succeeded, you can get more money. That's why one of the things which is reflecting good management in companies is how much the company has liquidity, which means that how much there are available money that exists in the banks that I am, as a manager of a company, can quickly withdraw to either meet crisis, risk, or take opportunity. For example, if I'm a company manager who work with development, with construction development, if I have good liquidity, if I have money that are available for me all the time, I get opportunities sometimes that they don't repeat themselves. For example, suddenly there is an area or a place in the city which is very central, very attractive place, and suddenly somebody thought, okay, the city want to sell it. If I have this money there, then it take me a couple of minutes to call the seller and says, okay, I have the money. Compare that to other person who doesn't have these resources, and he have to go to the bank and convince the bank to pay him. By the time that the bank agree or disagree, I have already bought the land, that place, because my management of my resources is correct. It's the same thing even at the country levels. You know, one of the most tragic thing that happened in the history of the Middle East, and I say that with really humbleness and with a feeling of sadness, that the amount of money that came to the region due to the oil resources through the last 60 years is huge, but all of it was mismanagement. All of it was mismanagement. There was no good planning and usage of these resources. Now, the governments of these countries, they want, because of the oil problem and because the prices of the oil are getting very low, they want to create an alternative economy. Because they never really planned for that day. They never really had that anticipation. They never really planned to use their resources, because development, for to change the shift of society, to change the whole nature of the economy, it takes works under many years. Now they are pressed in time. They need to do that quickly, and they don't have that relaxation advantage that they had it before. It's like, make it simple. It's like somebody who is going to do his exam after 3 months, spent all his 3 months playing and going to the movies and waste his time, and then suddenly the last week he wants to study so that he can pass the test. He will never pass. So one of the most important things in your strategies of success is that you have to plan your resources in advance. Before you get into the problems or before the demands come on you. Simple logic in life. There are a lot of people, I know that person. A lot of people, they get good work, they get good salary. They take their money and they consume it all the time. When the problems in life comes, when they lose their money, they don't have anything left because they consumed all their money or their life. I give you an example of that from the Middle East. I'm a Palestinian in the bottom. The Palestinian society in Kuwait started, the Palestinians started to come to Kuwait in the 1960s. And they lived there up to 1990s, 30 years. And I know that personally. And they had very good salaries. But what they're doing with their money, they're spending it on clothes, they were spending it in cars, they're spending it in food. Most of them, they just spent and spent and spent and spent. Okay, that's good for the economy, but at the personal level, you are insecure. And the problem is that they never really imagined that someday that insecurity will appear. 1990s, August 1990, Saddam Hussein comes into Kuwait, occupy the country. And one of the things he did, and his regime did, is that they used the Palestinian elements who live in Iraq. They used them in Kuwait, in controlling the people there, and that created a huge animosity, between the Kuwaitis and the Palestinians. And there was some history of antagonism. I'm honest. Don't believe a lot of things that said on TV. There was always some things there. But when that happened, when Saddam Hussein used some of the Palestinian fighters who live in Iraq and used them to control the people and to stop people and check their nationalities and all that, a lot of Kuwaitis got angry, and they have right for that. They felt that the Palestinians were not as loyal to them, and because the PLO itself and Yasser Arafat, He took a decision which is a catastrophe decision. He sided with Saddam Hussein, and he never really thought of what that will mean. He never he never not he never even considered the scenario that probably Saddam Hussein will be defeated. And that's again, that's an issue of leadership. We'll talk about it in another case. But that is totally put the Palestinian people in Kuwait in the spot. So 1990, when Kuwait was liberated, 91, after a couple of months, Kuwait was liberated, and naturally, Kuwait did not feel that Palestinians are a good accepted element in Kuwait. So there was an effort to push them to move. And many Palestinians left. There was about 400,000 Palestinians, 500,000 Palestinians. Before that, after the number dropped down to 400,000, a lot of people went to Canada, United States, Australia, or the Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. That's not the issue. This is politics. But I wanted to talk about this resource control. The ones among the Palestinians in Kuwait who were wise enough not to deplete their financial resources, the ones who were using this money in a moderate way, enjoying life, but putting some money aside for the bad days, they are the ones who succeeded in living in good dignity. They went to Canada, they went to the United States, they went to Europe, they had the money, they said, hey, bye-bye. But the ones who are most affected are the ones who spend their life consuming in the country, not planning their resources, and suddenly they have to fix that. And they are the ones who are still in Kuwait up to now. I mean, the 70%, 80% of the people who did not leave is because of this stuff. And I met some of them when I went to Kuwait. And one of them told me, Adli, we wasted our life for nothing. We have never planned for the days as we should have done. And that's what happens when you don't take care of your resources. And I don't mean only money resources, time resources. The way you feel about time, which is very important. I never met the guy who is successful in his life who's not really very careful about how he spent his time. Resources, even psychological resources. I mean, some people push themselves into achieving their goals until they really deplete themselves totally, and then they collapse. So what is the meaning of achieving your goals? If you work very hard all your life to come to a certain point, and when you are there, you collapse. What's the meaning of what you have done? That is because they did not plan the use of your resources, the energy, the cycle, because there are limitations. I tell you one thing. As there are limitations of the amount of money that we can spend, there are also limitations of how much we can, our psychology, how much we can put energy. And that's why from time to time we need to recover that energy. Other people who work, and their objectives, and at the end they collapse and they lose everything. That is important. I will be talking later on in future lectures about balance in life. How you enjoy life. The way you should live your life. It has to be based on balance. It has to be based on giving every aspect of your life what it was. And people who do not live in balance, they deplete their resources, and they become resourceless people. It's a good terminology to use. Resourceless people. Exactly like companies who spend all the money they get, and then they deplete everything. One of the problems with the older tax systems in Sweden, that it induced people to spend, companies, and you could get tax elevation or tax exemption by just buying. So you will reduce your part, or the portion of your your earnings, uh, and that's why your taxation goes down. But by spending money in buying things that are difficult to liquidate later, you put your company in a big risk. And that's what happened in the 90s. Many of the small companies in Sweden, small and medium-sized companies in Sweden, got into bankruptcy very quickly during the crisis in the 90s, because most of their capital was binded in things. It was not liquefied money that exists in banks. And some of these companies went into liquidity, or they became bankrupt by very small, based on very small debts that they could clear very easily if they had reserve money. And that's why after that, the Swedish government, the financial people in Sweden, they realized that was awful thinking, and they demands a certain level of liquidity in the company. I think many companies in Sweden now, they are, they have liquidity between 30, at least 30. That's what is recommended, between 30, 40, 50, so that you always have liquidity in the bank, so that you can take in money quickly and clear yourself. But before, when everything was connected to, people bought discs and cars and furniture, just to get rid of the excess of money they had, which was very stupid way of managing companies. That philosophy is changed, and people learn. But it is a great lesson when it comes to managing resources. So we talked about goals, and we said that there are 4 things which are related to that. That your goals should be highest possible. Your ceiling has to be highest, and they have to be dividable. That you can divide them into smaller objectives. Excuse me. More is objective. I use Swedish. Your objectives have to be highest possible, and these objectives and goals have to be able to. They should be dividable. You can cut them into smaller ones. The third is that they should be coupled to general philosophy in life. There was 3 things which you should consider when you're designing your goals. The second thing is the strategies of planning, how you plan to achieve these goals. These goals, these strategies, the strategies that you're using to achieve your goals have to be well thought of. They have to be very embedded in reality. They have to consider the time factor. And in these strategies, you have to plan your resources, the usage of your resources in a very well and coordinated way. The last thing I'll be talking about is implementation. I will leave implementation to the coming lecture, separate lecture, because I think implementation is a big issue, and we need to go in details into it. I hope this time by using this microphone, the voice will be far better. This is again Adli Abouzeedan, thanking you for listening to my humble person, and I hope everybody will benefit from this set of lectures, and I hope by that I fulfill my promise to my friend and my other friends also, that I shall reflect on strategic sense, out of management thinking about how they can achieve the goals. And I hope that all people can benefit from what I say. And these, most of it, these are reflections of my own experiences in life. So they're not like sound, they're not solid theories that are not subjected to criticism or evaluation. Thank you very much again. This is Adli Abouzeedan.